Nobody expects the Spanish blackout, but it happened. So AP is reporting this. Everybody's reporting this. Massive power outage in Spain and Portugal leaves thousands stranded and millions without lights. And I'm sure you've all seen the images now. People having to walk off trains without power. Some people being stuck on trains overnight. Stadiums being shut down. Hospitals having to go to their emergency backup and so on. It was a complete power loss in Spain, which is... surprising.
So just a quick thing. I didn't actually look into this deeply because I knew you were going to cover it today. So was this all of Spain?
Yes, I think it was. Well, there might have been a few splatterings of areas,
right.
But it was all of Spain, bits of Portugal, bits of France.
I heard not Gibraltar, though.
No, because they have sensibly kept their independence.
Rule Britannia.
Yes, of course. Now, you might think it's surprising because only, about a week ago, they managed to achieve 100% renewable power.
That's incredible. And then 3 days later?
So, everything is fixed, and then shocker, yes. How did they get to 100% renewable power? Well, a lot of it was... building out solar, which, fair
works
enough.
in Spain, yeah.
It's Spain, so, a bit of wind as well. And, of course, we play this without sound, getting terribly excited at the prospect of blowing up power. Do you want to play that, Samson? Stick it on without sound. Power stations being demolished.
This is just like the Germans.
Yeah.
With their nuclear power plants.
The soy face, the thumbs up. Yay!
Why is that good?
The power stations are coming down because, we don't need those anymore.
No.
So he's very happy.
The degrowth cult.
And then this happened.
What happened when we destroyed our power stations?
Yeah. Have I got longer? There we go. So basically, it's about just after 12 midday, massive drop off in power. And I've been speaking to my insiders in the power industry, and they basically told me it must have been a frantic race against time because you've got certain battery reserves that you can use to restart the grid. And so luckily because eventually it went on for so long, you hit the nighttime, and the nighttime demand falls off so heavily that they're able to basically get back up there. If they hadn't have been able to get it as restarted as quickly as they had, you would have to manually reset every substation.
Well, that's a good 12 hours without power.
Well, I mean, they weren't using any because there wasn't any being supplied, but you need a base level in order to be able to restart them.
I mean, that's 12 straight hours with
the
entire country zero power.
Yes.
That's crazy.
Yes. I mean, I suppose good for them that they managed to avoid a complete power loss and complete restart of the system, which could have taken days, if not weeks. So it could have been a lot worse, and obviously surprising since they're 100% renewable. You would have thought this sort of thing's behind us.
You should probably... I mean, if I was Spain, I'd be looking at this as a shot across the bow, right?
Well, you say Spain...
Not just Spain, yeah, all of us. Yeah,
We've all got a net zero policy. Yeah. Which, of course, then triggered... Samson, do you want to play this without sound as well? Obviously panic buying ensued... because, if the power goes out for 12 hours, you might run out of toilet paper, which is not the situation you want to be in. Yep. So people rushed into the shops and they bought absolutely everything they could.
I didn't realise how closely connected to toilet paper my electricity in my home was.
Well, COVID as well.
I guess so, yeah.
Basically any sort of upset.
Irrational fear of losing toilet paper.
What you do is you immediately rush for the toilet paper. I don't know why. That's apparently how it works. Yeah. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez yesterday said, what happened yesterday cannot ever happen again, and he vows to hold private operators to account. So, just to be clear, it's not the politicians' fault for dictating that we must have 100% renewable power. It's the fault of the power companies for doing what they were told by the politician. That's the big problem here.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Mm.
I mean, there's a couple of points here to think about. First, renewables by their very nature are variable and not reliable, whereas because the wind can blow too much, the clouds can shift too quickly, etc., etc.
Yes.
So that leads to shifts in power. The grid insists on stability for it to keep on functioning.
Yes.
So there's that consideration.
Oh, I'm definitely coming to that part, yes.
Yeah. The second consideration is that everything we have in the West is based on a just-in-time system. As in, once the system freezes, everything falls apart.
Well, not just in time, but also regularization of demand, thus the toilet paper example.
Yes, exactly. So the demand has to be very stable and predictable, and the supply has to be very stable and predictable, and that makes the system ridiculously fragile. And these are the same people who are thinking about going to war with Russia.
Yes.
In a system this fragile, that's very bold. And then the third factor is, if there are 2 or 3 nights without power, the kind of looting that you will get and the kind of crime that you will get in a society that's been recently diversified, especially in a society that's become low trust, is going to be incredible. So the risks that these guys are taking are only now becoming evident, but they're too much bought into the woke cult, including the net zero aspect of the woke cult, which is just eschatology for secularists, to actually see that there's a potential problem.
And if anyone doubts the point you're making about 3 days without power, I was living in London during the 2012 London riots.
Right.
And
2011.
2011. And, I mean, the looting was off the charts by the second night, let alone the third.
Yeah, and just, I mean, all correct, obviously. Just out of interest, what was France's power generation like during that time?
Well, France was fine.
Of course it was.
They've got lots of nuclear power
course
stations.
Southern France had problems initially.
Well, because it's linked.
Yes.
And actually, that's what I wanted to come on to next, because this is the bit that the mainstream media does not want to talk about, and therefore you're not going to get this anywhere else. I found a great explainer on grid frequency, which is something we don't talk about often. So I'm just going to have to quote bits of this to bring us up to speed, so we can move on to the rest of the banter. So everything points to the cause being a chain reaction from so-called frequency collapse. The danger of frequency collapse has been warned about for years, but politicians poisoned by the green brain virus simply refuse to listen. The cost of preventing frequency collapse has also skyrocketed across Europe. The somewhat comical aspect of this event is the authorities release information claiming the power collapse was due to external temperature variations to make everybody believe that climate change was the cause. Now, we don't know the precise trigger, but there really is no other explanation than chain reaction through frequency collapse, because there is not the resistance in the system, and I'll be coming to that in a minute. Electricity is consumed the moment it's produced, therefore the power supply is a pull phenomenon, not a push. Consumers draw power from power plants by turning on switches. There must always be an exact balance. The second most important factor is the power supply is based on alternating current. Like most other countries, Spain has a supply of 220 volts, 50 hertz. 50 hertz means that the current switches polarity to plus and minus 50 times a second, and I'll explain how that's done in a moment. And this hertz rate, this frequency, must be exact, because basically all the power stations need to line up with each other and produce at the same frequency, and it's basically a sine wave.
They're all pumping the same energy at the same frequency into the same grid.
Yes,
right.
if you've got one power point at the peak of the sine wave and the other one at the bottom,
cancel each other out.
Well, it's worse than cancel each other out.
Oh, do they amplify each other?
No, well, they kind of do cancel each other out, but they do it in a very destructive way. So imagine 2 bicycle wheels that have been 2 different bicycles, and the 2 bicycle wheels have been tied together with a rope. And if they're both going around at the same speed and the same rotation, works beautifully. Yeah. If they start going the opposite way from each other, or they get out of sync, both bicycles break apart. And that's what happened with France, in that France hadn't probably had enough power to supply them to get them over the hump. But when it started losing frequency, they had to disconnect.
Right.
So there would have been a French Homer Simpson somewhere sat watching this. And it's like, uh-oh,
Mon Dieu.
Press the kill switch and cut them off.
Yeah.
Because if you get this out of sync thing. So... And then he basically goes on to say that green politicians don't realise this, and they've embarked on the world's largest energy experiment, where every city becomes a small solar power plant, every mountaintop becomes a power plant through wind and so on. Now, with this situation that I described, where you've got to keep this frequency in a line across different power plants, that's actually bloody impressive.
Yes.
If it's just a big power plant next to each city. Doing that on a national scale. And then you've got to remember that the European nations, they all link up. So not only do you need your power plants in 2 Spanish cities to be on the same frequency, you need the one in Germany and France and Scandinavia. They all need to be at this precise frequency because it's all linked up. So you can see if there's a frequency drop, they've got no choice but to immediately start islanding everything and cutting them off. Thus the issue here. So with that, and I'll try and get through the rest of this, explain it as quick as I can. Let's just watch the first minute of his video, Samson, and just refresh us on our GCSE science.
It's been a long time.
What you're looking at is a very simple alternating current or AC generator, a device that converts mechanical energy into electrical energy. This part is called the armature. It's made from metal, and electricity is generated by its rotation between two magnets. To show clearly how the generator works, one half has been coloured yellow. The armature can be rotated in various ways, for example using pressurised steam, as in a power plant, a flow of water from a dam, or a flow of air from a wind turbine. These parts are called slip rings. They are also made of metal and are connected to the armature. The slip rings and the armature rotate together. The rings are connected to brushes made from carbon. The brushes make contact with the rings as the rings rotate, so they provide an electron flow within the system. In order to determine the magnitude and direction of current, a galvanometer is attached.
So you can see the frequency.
When the armature starts to rotate, an electric current is formed. This is because the magnetic flux changes over time.
Right, so we'll leave that there.
Yeah, so magic, right, got it.
Yeah. So, I mean, the only difference I understand between that and modern power stations is that rather than using permanent magnets, as indicated here, you use superconducting magnets. So you get the spin going to build up your voltage, and then you feed power into the superconducting magnets, and then that gives you the amperage, and you can taper that amperage up and down. Right. So the bit about how all these power stations need to supply the right amount of power, you can feed power in and out of those magnets once you've got your voltage up and once you've got your frequency. And as you can see, the whole thing with this is that the frequency is a natural byproduct of how the energy is generated, because the hertz frequency is basically just a function of how that spins. Yeah, so if that spins 50 times a second, well, there you go. You've got your spin, and it is a basic byproduct of energy generation. And as long as you get them all going at that sort of spin rate, and actually, I mean, it sounds difficult, but these things are huge. They're very heavy, and they've got a lot of momentum. They've got a lot of grid inertia going to them. So once you've got a whole bunch of these spinning, actually it's fairly, well, I wouldn't say straightforward, but it's manageable to keep them all spinning at the precise rate. So that all makes sense, right? That's alternating current. Green energy doesn't use that.
Does it use direct current?
Solar is direct current.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know anything about this,
floats.
so why would I?
Yeah. Wind
is direct current far less powerful?
I think it's less efficient. I don't have the physics to explain why.
I remember in GCSE physics, apparently direct current's just far weaker than alternating current, which is why they chose alternating current. It goes less of a distance and things like this over the line. So I don't know.
My understanding is that direct current is good for long transmission at very high voltage or something.
I don't know what I'm talking about, so don't ask me.
Yeah, I can't explain that either, unless you're also a physicist.
Let me message Karen.
No, okay.
I'm not.
All right, well, we skip on that. But yeah, obviously solar power produces direct current. So if you've got solar panels on your roof, you need an inverter, and the inverter turns it into alternating current. But it doesn't really turn it into alternating current. What it does is it sees what the grid is producing, the frequency, and it kind of mimics it. But it doesn't produce its own. It can only mimic it and feed it into the system. So now you start to see the issue that they had in Spain, is that because they were so heavily reliant on renewables, and wind does produce an alternating current, but the alternating current alternates with wind.
Yeah.
So they end up...
It's not a stable alternating current, unlike the stable alternating current that generates from conventional.
So they often end up converting it into direct current and then inverting it back into a mimic of the frequency rate that we need here. So now you've got your problem. So whatever happened in Spain, and it might have been, some weather phenomenon. It might have been a surge in demand. Maybe, maybe the Spanish discovered, because it was about the same time as our podcast went out. So maybe the Spanish discovered Lotus Eaters and they all turned on the switch at the same time.
No doubt.
Maybe it was a weather phenomenon, whatever. The point is that the system did not have the resilience to, whenever there was a fluctuation, which normally would have been observed by massive steam turbines with the grid inertia that they have and the frequency composition that they have, when it's renewables, it's just inherently unstable. It's very, very brittle. Because they'd be generating a frequency somewhere in Spain, and then everything else is mimicking it, but there's just no inertia there in order to do it, which basically gave us up on. So if you've got 100% renewable system, but you need frequency, you need the spin, well, what do? How do you generate that? Okay, the answer is that having got rid of all the massive flywheels, you then add them back in again. So this is Ireland's solution to the problem. They're basically just going to make massive flywheels and spin them.
Spinning wheels,
using solar power and wind power, so using direct current to spin a flywheel to create the frequency, which the direct current then mimics in order to feed back into the system.
Right.
So, spinning a flywheel from coal or nuclear is bad. So we've got to get rid of this. Got to get rid of the spinny thing, but then we've got to add back the spinny thing. Except this time, it's not generating any power. It's being pushed along by solar power.
This is the thing about the whole Ed Miliband lie that green energy is going to be cheap. You're destroying existing infrastructure that you have, which comes with a massive price. You then need to replace all of its functions in a dozen different ways.
Yes.
And then you need to invent completely new maintenance systems that you have no experience with, using a labor force that's less skilled in order to achieve the same result. Naturally, this is going to be a lot more expensive, but try telling that to Mr. Ed Miliband.
And also, you've just created a little spaghetti solution to what was otherwise a straightforward...
Well, frequency was a natural byproduct of the old way it worked.
Yeah.
Like now it's artificially imposed.
This is what I mean by how was France, because obviously nuclear power is just so much superior to all of this system.
Yes.
So there's just no question. With carbon byproducts and actual energy output, like nuclear power plants. I looked this up. They're 95% efficient, whereas solar and wind are like 35%.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
And it's just not even worth talking.
And the argument from safety about nuclear is so hollow, because if you can make a submarine and an aircraft carrier run on nuclear, that is about as safe as it gets.
Well, the as well, it's as safe as solar power.
Yeah. So they keep on lying about these things, and I think corruption has a lot to do with it. I think one thing that we should be looking at is the extent to which politicians and parties associated with net zero zealotry are actually receiving money, like from people like nice Mr. Dale Vance, who are involved in this industry and who stand to benefit from it.
See, I view a lot of it as being ideology. I view a lot of it, I mean, you described it as zealotry. I think they have this really weird commitment to the idea that essentially man has to be dependent on this kind of power generation, or else something immoral is happening in their minds, which is why they look at nuclear power, and that is going to just destroy the entire renewables industry.
Completely.
Because there's just no logical reason why you would choose one over the other. I mean, it's just... And all they can do is fearmonger. So, but what about,
Fukushima?
I do have to pull you up on that point about nuclear being as safe as solar power. Is actually safer.
Oh,
more people die of solar power, and
checked in real time.
Yeah, and the reason more people die of solar power is because they fall off roofs.
Yes, yeah, good point. Yeah, nuclear power probably kills fewer birds as well. Wind.
Yes, the wind. Yes. Yeah. Now, the other thing you've got to bear in mind is because the nuclear power stations in Spain, they've got a couple, and they did go offline as well. And the reason they went offline is because of this frequency. They had to disconnect in order to protect the systems. And basically every EU country, because we're all trying to get to 100% renewable, although France have decided that renewable includes nuclear.
It does.
Well, it does. Yes, I agree. But everybody else has decided no, that's not the way to go.
I hate having to praise the French. I just have to praise the French on this.
Well, the thing to remember is that renewables aren't renewable, in the sense that the materials that you need to make the batteries, and the batteries have an expiry date, and they might explode. In Lebanon, we have a lot of issues with sort of batteries not being stored properly and possibly exploding. So you have the issue with the safety of the batteries. You have the issue with the resources used for solar panels and for wind and for batteries not being renewable in any way, and requiring enormous mining operations that are mostly done on the backs of slaves in the Congo.
Yes.
Of slave labor in the Congo. And so the whole narrative that this is renewable, they aren't. The sun is a renewable resource, but the solar panel is not, and the wind turbine...
Chinese import again.
Exactly, and the wind turbine dies in 20, 25 years, and then has to be buried underground somewhere. Some anthropologist in the future is going to find fields full of buried wind turbines, and ask themselves, was this a religious cult?
There's another.
And the answer is yes, it was.
Exactly.
And the answer is yes, it was.
Correct,
the sun god, 2.0.
If you're watching this in 1,000 years' time, no, it's genuinely a cult.
And there's another geopolitical angle to this, in that every European country basically has the same energy emergency plan, which is we get it from our neighbours.
Yeah.
Now that works when Russia is the last country in that chain.
Yes.
It doesn't work when Russia is no longer in that. Yes. They might think that, okay, France is going to be the last thing in the chain, but France obviously had to disconnect to protect its power plants from the mismatch in the frequency.
Yeah. Moreover, why are we giving the French that kind of power over Europe?
Yes.
If the French are literally the ones saying you're going to have to do exactly as we said, or we cut your power.
Well, they become the new Russia, don't they?
Oh, exactly.
Which has the whip hand.
Exactly. Why do we want that? Why wouldn't we just build our own?
Well, and Ed Miliband is pushing us towards it. So I did a Brokenomics. Where is it? Okay. Oh, yes. Also, I should mention that the Spanish electric company warned in February that this was going to happen sooner or later.
Oh, really? By the way, guys, the entire country is going to go black soon. Sorry.
Yeah, because they could. To industry insiders, this is actually fairly obvious. I spoke to an industry insider not so long ago. I did a Brokenomics on nuclear power, and I got in touch with that chap. And his basic message was, by the way, everything that Spain is doing, we're doing here.
Of course we are.
Ed Miliband is pushing us towards this. And the other thing that he said that was quite interesting that I thought was. Basically, he was emphasising how extremely lucky that we got, because this was when you get into this sort of cascade collapse, so obviously it rippled out all over Spain. It started to go into Portugal and France, and then it got killed because it got disconnected. There's no particular reason why that wouldn't have necessarily... So somebody was sharp on the button somewhere. There's no reason why that wouldn't have rippled out all over Europe. And then if we could have... All of us could have been in the situation where we're having to spend weeks restarting manually each substation. So we could have had weeks without power. Now, why is this so important? Because this is a live view of the UK grid at the moment. Right, so let's have a look. So 18.1% we are generating ourselves.
18%?
18%. So interconnectors there, and we're getting 7.6% from France. We're giving a bit to Ireland for whatever reason, and we're taking some in from the Netherlands, Norway, Belgium, Denmark, and so on.
We're only generating 18% of our own.
No, we are generating the rest of it. It's 18% is what we're
18% from other people. Right.
Okay. Yeah, we get a lot from wind for whatever reason.
But look at that, only 9% from nuclear.
Yeah,
and what was it, 22% from gas, and biomass. Is that coal or is that?
No,
biomass. That should be big pots of rain and stuff,
fertilizer, and stuff.
Food products, that kind of stuff.
It's like again, for anyone who doesn't know, Britain has something like 185 billion tons of coal on it.
Yes, and we've got fracking resources, and we've got the North Sea.
Yeah, yes. So we are actually a very energy-rich country.
But we choose to be almost 20% dependent on other people.
9.6% nuclear. I mean, why not just do what France does, just entire country nuclear? Because it's not like we don't have safe sources of nuclear as well. Canada and Australia have loads of uranium.
Let's take a look at that. Nuclear power plants.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
So Spain actually has 7, of course, which had to come offline because of the frequency collapse. France has 56, one's being renewed or something like that. We've got 9 and we're building 2.
Germany recently decommissioned their last ones.
Yeah, they're down to 3 now. Even Russia has 37.
No, I think Germany turned them off a few months ago.
Yeah, I don't have a date on this, so that's possible. Yeah. That might be gone as well.
Because I was just like, what are you doing? And the Germans like, we will go back to coal. Yeah. It's like, what are you doing, idiots?
What you have to remember is that there can't be prosperity without cheap food and cheap energy.
Exactly.
There's no prosperity for anyone. There's no industry, there's no manufacturing, there's no economic success of any sort without cheap food and cheap energy. And this country can very easily feed itself and others and provide power for itself and others. But there are political choices that are being made that go completely against that because of strange ideological reasons that are best explained as a form of cult having taken over the decision makers' minds.
Completely true. Can we go back to that map? Sorry, just a second. It blows my mind how France is the one country in Europe that basically escaped the cult on this. And I think it comes back to sort of like the sort of futurist mindset of the French Revolution. Or like, we're going to build like the beautiful futuristic high tech country of tomorrow. And the French took it seriously. I mean, don't get me wrong, they've done a lot of things wrong, but like on this, they're so obviously correct, and it's driving me crazy that we're genuinely worried about our power supplies. Like, but
it was also a geopolitical choice for the French.
Yeah.
They wanted to make sure that they weren't reliant on anybody, be it the Gulf and the possibility of an energy embargo from the Gulf, be it the Russians, be it the Americans. This is why the French have a fully independent military supply chain. They make sure that their food production is fully self-sufficient, and they have energy self-sufficiency. This is what allows you to actually be a serious geopolitical player.
Yes, it is.
So in many respects, France is already at the position that Trump is trying to take the US to.
Yes. The US has all of the ingredients to be there.
It's just chosen.
It's chosen not to, yeah.
But in many ways, it's chosen not to.
Yeah. We could do exactly the same thing. We could just build, like, I looked it up the other day. It's only something like a dozen power plants to power every house in Britain. It's like, okay, so let's build 15 or something. Make sure we've got a lot of excess, a lot of slack in the system, whatever it is. And it costs something like 130 billion. Okay, that's a lot of money, but you only need to spend that once. And then you've got whatever the maintenance.
As opposed to destroying the infrastructure that you already have to replace it with less reliable infrastructure, which you're going to have to replace anyway.
And we're spending all that money on the renewable boondoggle energy.
So that was the one thing that I didn't come to that I think I should throw in there. If you were going to design this system from scratch for renewables, you would design the system to be DC rather than AC.
Right.
So what does that involve? Every fridge freezer, every oven, every washing machine, every TV, every computer, every air conditioner, all of it, you need to throw it all out and buy new appliances. So either...
Called the Green New Deal, Dan.
Yep. So either we carry on with this green revolution and we have to either massively increase because if you're going to do it with renewables, you need 100% redundancy. You're going to need massive amounts of batteries, and batteries don't need to be like physical batteries. They can be pulleys and mine shafts. You winch them up when you've got excess power and you let them go down. Or you can have a 2-stage lake and gravity pump. There's a whole bunch. But you need massive redundancy if you're going to do it the renewable thing. And you don't have the grid inertia, so you've got a fragile grid that can collapse at any time. Or you need to build huge spinning flywheels in order to give you back the inertia that you've just taken away. So you need to either massively over-engineer the system, or you need to throw away every appliance in your country and start again.
I'd rather build nuclear.
Maybe a giant treadmill around London that we can all run on and sort of try to make that into a flywheel.
The Japanese actually have something like that. They've got roads where there's a little indent thing. So when you step on it, it generates a very tiny amount of power.
Right.
And
okay.
Like
we ought to put those in our immigration centres then.
I guess we're going to
power the country.
I guess we've got no choice.
I'll just mention that you've covered this in your blog as well.
Not in as much detail as we have now, but yes.
If you would like to watch the full uncut version that is also uncensored, head on over to lotuseaters.com to find out more.